Hello, everyone. Welcome in, welcome in. Folks on Zoom, you can't see me, but this is Janora. She, her pronouns from Kinfolk Tech. And I'm just so excited to start off the program for us today. Thank you all for being here in the room and also for folks who are tuning in wherever you are. Today's teaching is called Seeding, Repair, and Revolution. And we are here at the Laundromat Project. Thank you so much to y'all for hosting us here. This is a teaching in collaboration with them. So yeah, we're super excited to have them, as well as an assortment of beautiful panelists here today that y'all can see on your screen. And we'll just jump right in. Next slide, please, David. So just to give a little bit of a summary of what Kinfolk Tech as an org is for folks who might not be familiar. Kinfolk Tech is a nonprofit organization as well as a radical technology collective that really uplifts community stories at the intersection of art, history, and technology. So we bring place-based stories to light, weaving technology and community design to really bring about collective memory and shape collective memory, all about kind of reclaiming public space to hear our stories as well as envisioning new futures together in community. Next slide, please. And just to kind of concretize everything I just said into our actual initiatives, we offer augmented reality monuments. So if you're not familiar with augmented reality, it's kind of like Pokemon Go, if you've ever played Pokemon Go, where you can kind of like look in a phone or a Zoom screen and see literally a monument pop up in front of you through the phone, but it's like in your space. It's kind of like you're looking at through a camera and it's there. And we build those monuments with community organizations, artists, and researchers to really amplify these stories and histories that really need to be spotlighted in the community. So we do that, as well as we do community-centered programs like teach-ins like this one, community imagination workshops, walking tours, etc., to really kind of aliven that history in dialogue in person and virtually, as you can tell, right, if you're tuning in virtually. So that's us. And then, this teaching is a part of a larger teaching series that we've had. This is actually the last teaching in our series, the People's Archive series, which is under a larger initiative that we have at Kinfolk called Archives. So basically, we're really responding to the 250th anniversary of America this year and thinking about what does it mean for us to reclaim our space, counter the national narrative, and really kind of showcase our community stories and build the People's Archive. So that's where the name comes from. So this teaching is really bringing folks from seemingly disparate fields like creative technologists, artists, researchers, historians to really come together and have these really critical conversations about memory work and how we can continue to build the tools that will preserve our futures and our times at the moment right now too. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, now I'll pass this to Aisha from the Laundromat Project to talk about the Laundromat Project.
Hello, everyone in the room at the LP storefront and also on virtual. I'm Aisha. And I'll do a quick brief overview of the Laundromat Project and who we are. So the Laundromat Project is celebrating our 20-year anniversary this year. We're a 20-year, 20 years, we have been working at the intersection of art, social justice, and community building and community development. Our mission is to advance artists and neighbors as change agents in their own communities. We believe fundamentally in the power of creativity to create change in our neighborhoods and our communities, to build a greater sense of connection amongst neighbors and community members, and to create a more grounded sense of belonging. We do our work in a number of ways and through a number of initiatives. We have an artist development program, which is a residency and a fellowship that supports artists who want to learn how to use their creative practice as a means of building community or cultural organizing. We also give money to people in many different ways, but in particular through a microgrant program where we seed or provide resources for folks to be able to host programs, build their own initiatives, advance ideas and visions and dreams that they have of their own. That's our Create Ands program, Create and Connect, Create and Reconnect, Create and Reflect. And then we also do community programming both here in our physical storefront space, which is located in Westside Brooklyn, on Fulton Street between Kingston and Tompkins Avenues. We have a monthly series called our Liberation Series, and a little shout out spotlight that our Liberation Series is returning on September 11th. So definitely check our website and our Instagram for more details there. But we do programming in our storefront space as well as pop-ups around and out and about in the Westside neighborhood.
Yeah, just to further kind of ground this into the space and like the subject matter of the teaching, I wanted to talk about the augmented reality monument that this teacher was inspired by, and the person behind the augmented reality monument, Fannie Lou Hamer. Just really want to call her story into the space because we'll be talking about reparations, and that is deeply intertwined with liberation. And Fannie Lou Hamer was super profound in fighting for our liberation, specifically when it comes to voting rights. She was a sharecropper. She had a deep relationship with the land of Mississippi, and really wanted to vote, but was met with so much racial violence and oppressive atrocities. And she was able to transform her outrage on voter suppression and how she was treated, and also the condition of the Black community around her. She was able to kind of transform that outrage of how folks were feeling and how systemic oppression was into collective power. And so she became a powerful orator, an activist, organizer, joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, co-founded the Mississippi Democratic Freedom Party, which reached 80,000 members nationwide after only a few months. And she's really known for her powerful speeches, empowering Black community, rendering the exhaustion and pain visible, and making folks feel heard and seen, sharing her vision of liberation, and also uniting folks through song, which is important. So she's really known for her voice, and I think she is a representation and an epitome of what love and courage looks like. And I feel like I would like to posit that into the space, that perhaps in the fight for our liberation, in the fight for reparations, that love and connectivity and really commitment to community is centered. She said, well, after being fired for attempting to vote in 1962, Fannie Lou Hamer said, "They kicked me off the plantation, they set me free. It's the best thing that could happen. Now I can work for my people." And so really tying in that commitment to people and community that we want to bring forth today. We have a monument to Fannie Lou Hamer on the Kinfolk app, so feel free to scan that QR code or wait until the end of the teaching to check that monument out. Next slide, please. And then also just wanted to name the zones of imagination that we're really focusing on today for this teaching: reparations and radical futures. Zones of imagination, these are just the things that we focus on at Kinfolk when it comes to our programming. And I want to read the slide, so I'm going to stand up a little bit so I can read those definitions or those ideas out loud and speak them into the space. So when I say reparations, I mean holding powerful institutions accountable for historical and ongoing harms while working towards generational healing and restoration for communities that have experienced systematic oppression. And when I say radical futures, I mean envisioning sustainable, liberatory futures for Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, and queer communities, moving beyond traditional power structures to imagine new worlds grounded in lived experiences. Next slide, please.
And I want to just do some acknowledgements before we get started with the program. Land or place acknowledgement. And so for the LP, as an organization rooted in Bed-Stuy, the neighborhood of Central Brooklyn, we acknowledge that we are on the occupied and unceded lands of the Canarsie, who are part of the Montezuma Bay. We recognize them as the original stewards of this land and pay respect to their elders, past, present, and future. We also acknowledge the long-time gentrification and displacement happening within Bed-Stuy and the persistent injustices faced around police accountability, food and health access, and education inequities, to name a few. We acknowledge that in 2025 and continuing into 2026, the federal government undertook a systematic campaign of administrative erasure, removing signage, plaques, interpretive materials, and digital content that named and honored the histories of Black, queer, and indigenous people within national parks and public lands. We also acknowledge this erasure did not begin with a single administration. Next slide. And our values. It has been an ongoing and deliberate use of institutional power to determine whose histories are legible, whose grief is visible, and whose existence is permitted to be remembered. Archives are not only records of the past, they are the foundation of future work. For Black, Indigenous, people of color, and queer communities, the archive is infrastructure. It is how we transmit survival, assert continuity, and build towards justice. The Laundromat Project and Kinfolk lead from a place of love, intentionality, and accountability. And as an organization rooted in Bed-Stuy, we aim to honor and advance its long, rich history as a Black diasporic neighborhood. As proud Black-rooted organizations, the LP and Kinfolk, we embrace the weight of these legacies. We understand that our vision is stronger and our destination is closer when we move with community front and center. Next slide. Still me. Okay. Just want to ground in a few community agreements as related to folks' engagement here in the space. This space is for everyone. We ask all participants to help keep it inclusive, respectful, and safe. If something feels wrong, find a staff member. LP staff members, you can raise your hands. We expect respect for all people regardless of race, gender, sexuality, disability, age, or background. We expect mindfulness of shared space, including cleaning up after yourself. We expect care for each other's physical and emotional safety. We also expect cooperation with staff and program facilitators. We do not tolerate discriminatory, racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, or ableist language or actions. We do not tolerate violence, threats, intimidation, or verbal abuse. We do not tolerate sexual harassment or unwelcome advances. And we do not tolerate unauthorized alcohol, illegal substances, or smoking on the premises. Or also, I'm missing some weapons of any kind. Or intentional damage to property. So we just ask that you treat our home as if you would treat your own. Next.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aisha. This is Janora speaking. Just want to say a few quick housekeeping notes before we jump right in to our panelists to talk about themselves. I want to say that there will be time at the end for audience Q&A. So if folks on Zoom throughout the event, feel free to put your questions in the chat, as well as you can use also the Q&A button on Zoom. And then if you're in person, we actually have note cards for you if you want to write some questions down, but we'll have a lot of time for that during that section. I want to encourage folks on Zoom as well to be active in the chat. We really want the virtual space to be like super alive and lovely for you all as well. And also, last reminder that we are both nonprofits and there are ways to continue to support the Launchpad Project and Kinfolk Tech. So stay tuned to the very end to hear those ways that you can continue to show up for us and support us. With all that said, I want to welcome all of the panelists. We have Ajamu Kojo. Yes. Shanna Sabio. Niki Franco. And Ariana Faye Allensworth. Beautiful. And so if Daily, you can hit the next slide. And then I believe y'all have a mic over there that should be working. So we can pass it to Ariana to start us off with introductions to the work. So
hi, y'all. It's so good to be here. It's also extra special to be at the LP. I was an artist in residence here in 2019 and 2020, which feels like a lifetime ago, but definitely so much gratitude to the LP. It's definitely a space that's really fortified and enriched my creative practice. So hi, I'm Ariana Faye Allensworth. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an artist, cultural worker, independent curator based here in New York City. And I really use the lens of place to ground my work. I work across cultural organizing, visual storytelling, and a lot of my work is deeply coalitional and collective based. And I was born and raised in San Francisco, which definitely is a place that has really informed my commitment to place-based work. I am a fourth generation San Franciscan and really entered into sort of place-based and anti-gentrification organizing through general inquiry around my own family's displacement from San Francisco and trying to understand the forces surrounding that. And so what started as like a general inquiry into the history of urban renewal and its impact on Black communities in the Western Addition, which is the neighborhood my family is from. I eventually found my way to the Anti-Eviction Mapping Project, which you can see some images of our work up top. But we are a volunteer-run collective with chapters in New York City, in the Bay Area, in Los Angeles, and Seattle. And it's been a political home for me for over 10 years now. And the project started in the Bay Area really in response to heightened evictions that were being fueled by the tech boom of the early 2010s, and a group of organizers who were a part of a collective called Eviction Free San Francisco really just began researching sort of the relationships between the tech industry, real estate speculation, and the rise of corporate landlordism that we really saw across the country in the shadow of the foreclosure crisis. And so we began producing maps, oral history work, narrative work, just to support movements, tenant movements in the cities in which we have chapters, to really use data in ways that could be actionable to their organizing. And so that's a bit about that work. And I'll just say that I think it's been a really important orientation for me in thinking about how to bring an abolitionist lens as well to housing justice and recognizing the ways that our work isn't just representational, but really supporting folks in building community power and resisting displacement and finding alternatives to the eviction crisis. And then lastly, I'll just close with a project I'm currently working on, which you can see down at the bottom. And this work is being done through an emerging sort of worker-owned artist cooperative that I'm starting in collaboration with Fred McNeil Jr. and Dr. Ashley Adams. We're called ACRES, which stands for the Artist Cooperative for Regenerative and Emergent Strategy. And we're really thinking about how to use art and design as tools to mobilize and build more regenerative cultural ecosystems and more just relationships to place. And our current work is in solidarity with the historic Black Freedom Town of Allensworth, California. You can see some archival and present day images of the town down at the bottom of the slides. But I'm a descendant of the town's founders. They first settled there in 1908 as part of the Black Towns movement, which was a whole ecosystem of autonomous Black communities and self-determined communities that were founded during Reconstruction and in the late 19th and early 20th century. And so our work is really in solidarity with the living community there and thinking about ways to support their self-determined futures in the greater San Joaquin Valley, in which Allensworth is a part of. So I'll share more about our work in Allensworth later, but that's just a little preview of my practice.
Thank you. So inspired by your work. I also was an artist in residence here a few years after you. And so I'm really grateful to the Laundromat Project for continuing to exist and fight for artists and our right to remain in the neighborhoods that we create and make beautiful. So my name is Shanna Sabio. I am co-founding director of Grow House Design and Development Group. I was born in Brownsville, raised between Bushwick and Bed-Stuy. So I'm a Brooklyn girl through and through. I had a brief stint in Atlanta for college, where I do feel like I fell in love with Southern culture and sensibility and resistance and struggle and grit, and determination. But when I returned here to raise my children, we also came up against gentrification, which is something Aisha mentioned. My family is a family of nomads. We are a Pan-African family. I have, roots in Barbados, actually Bahamas, Panama, Jamaica, Colombia, Costa Rica. And I feel like that work really informs my love for Black people wherever we are and wherever we want to go, which is the genesis for Grow House. If you look, some of our practice has been in building community land trust movements. On the top left side, that's our second cohort of community land stewards that have joined the Black Land Trust. We use a very deep relational lens for our community land trust work, where we go through 6 weeks of history and healing. We also talk about our bylaws in depth and detail so that people understand and feel capable of governing an important initiative like the Black Land Trust, which will operate in Bed-Stuy, Crown Heights, Ocean Hill, and Clinton Hill. You'll also see some of our youth work. We believe that part of the repair work is bringing the next generation into positions of power and decision-making and dreaming. One of the things that we've noticed is our country really fights against anyone having an imagination for anything beautiful in the future. And talking to our youth, allowing them space to dream, create, be messy, not be perfect in a society that is expecting everything to look Instagram perfect is really a part of our mission. So you'll see them prototyping ideas for their master plan in Brooklyn. And we encourage them, just use whatever we got in the space and make something that reflects your values and vision. And we actually met with Chi Ose. We're just branching into elected official coalition building to bring them into this understanding that our youth aren't just something to be treated as problems, but as stewards of the future. And so he came to our youth assembly this past spring and was really impressed by the vision that our young people were able to bring together and present to him with courage and confidence. And then you'll notice there is an illuminated sculpture. This is a new initiative. It's going to be unveiled tomorrow. This is an honor. Thank you. It's been a year in the making. We received a grant from Small Business Services to honor the 400-year anniversary of the first enslaved Africans being brought to the United States, so New Amsterdam. Also the 250-year anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, 100-year anniversary of Negro History Week, 50-year anniversary of Black History Month. So many anniversaries happening this year at the same time as our history is actively being erased. And so at this intersection, which is a crossroads that play on the X, Malcolm X Boulevard and Harriet Tubman Avenue, we wanted to make sure that the newcomers who walk through our neighborhood understand his legacy, his importance, and can no longer ignore that that boulevard is named after him. So the three structures, on one side, there's engraved names of Bed-Stuy luminaries, Black Bed-Stuy luminaries. Then we also have a map of Bed-Stuy, and the third piece will be crafted by community. I'm sure we've missed people, but we've left that open so that our community can place itself onto the structure. And then finally, on the right-hand side, you'll see community members designing Adinkra symbols, their own symbols that will end up being spray painted on the structure at some point. The stencils have been created. The whole structure is really about us being able to take it apart, break it, put it back together, move it. We work with designers to make sure that we reclaim that legacy of the Tuskegee Institute, where people were actually making their future with their hands. So I will pause there. And yeah, I'm just so happy to be here and to share more about practice.
Good evening. This is Ajamu Kojo talking. First and foremost, I want to thank Kinfolk and the LP, which I'm just now learning the colloquialism, so I want to sound cool. I was gonna say the library, once again, my name is Ajamu Kojo. I'm a fine artist and a scenic artist. I work in the film and television industry as a scenic artist, and I have my own studio practice as a fine artist. Before I get into what you're seeing on the screen, if you bear with me, I just want to read a little something about my ideology as an artist. Just wrote it, so. My artistic ideology is grounded in the belief that image making is a form of historical intervention. The work asserts that painting, particularly figurative, materially rigorous painting remains a vital tool for correcting narrative absence, confronting inherited myths, posing alternative futures rooted in truth-seeking rather than erasure. At the core of my practice is a commitment to reclamation over representation. Rather than merely depicting Black subjects, I reconstruct the visual authority historically denied to them. Our portraits do not ask for inclusion with Western art history. They challenge its premises, repurposing its materials, techniques, and compositional language to expose the moral contradictions embedded within the canon itself. Working through the Misch technique, which is a technique that I learned in Austria, it's a mixture, basically translates to mixed technique. It's a mixture of tempera and oil glazes, tempera paint and oil glazes, which is water-based and oil. This process is informed by my background in film, scenic painting. It approaches each canvas as a staged site inquiry, where light, architecture, symbolism, and gesture operate cinematically to collapse time. Historical figures, contemporary descendants, and imagined interiors coexist, reinforcing the belief that the past is not fixed, but continuously active in the present. In this way, my paintings function less as static objects and more as evidentiary spaces, visual arguments that demand sustained looking and ethical engagement. My ideology is also inseparable from politics, dignity, and accountability. The work insists that beauty is not decorative, but strategic, an entry point through which viewers are disarmed before being confronted with the weight of the historical truth in my work. Thanks. Gold leaf classical portrait conventions and lush surfaces are employed not to romanticize history, but to interrogate what has historically been deemed worthy of reverence and why. Community and lineage are central to the work, to my worldview, through projects such as Black Wall Street, the case for reparations, which you see on the screen here. I extend paintings beyond the studio into dialogue with the descendants, archives, and living memory. Here, portraiture becomes an act of repair, bridging generational trauma with resisting closure or simplification. The ideology rejects the notion of the solitary genius in favor of the artist, listener, witness, and steward. Ultimately, my ideology is rooted in the long game. I work with an awareness of posterity, creating images meant to endure, to be cited, and to remain unsettled. Practice affirms that art does not merely reflect culture, it shapes moral imagination, and with it, the possibility of justice. So my background is actually, I got a degree in undergraduate film production from Howard University. So as much as I love painting, I'm a cinephile, I love filmmaking. So I employ those practices in my own studio work as a painter. And so what you're seeing on the screen here are images that show the photo shoots that I set up as mini film photo shoots side by side with the paintings that were created based on the reference photos that I took. So, like I approach the work like a filmmaker. We have costuming, we have craft services, we have a production designer, we have PAs, we have lighting. And I really take great care in creating these environments for the work that I'm producing. And this series in particular, Black Wall Street, the case for reparations, which we can talk about, further discuss later, is something that I came across when I was a student at Howard. I didn't know anything about the Tulsa Massacre of 1921. When I was looking through microfiche for you youngsters out here, we didn't have it. Well, it just came out. Dating myself now, but what was my point? My point was I was researching and I saw this article, Massacre on Black Wall Street, and I didn't quite know what it was. I thought it had something to do with the numbers racket in Harlem. further investigation, I assumed it had something to do with Rosewood, which it adjacently did, because during that time, John Singleton came out with a film called Rosewood, and it talked about the massacre of this town. And so I assumed, that that's what this was about. Come to find out, the summer of 1919, there were many towns that were decimated by mobs. So fast forward, I'm not going to say nothing now. Fast forward to 2016. This idea came back to me that I'd filed away, and I thought that maybe I'd do a documentary covering the massacre. But I was more enthralled in my studio practice. And so I had the first solo exhibition of these works at the Sheen Center in Soho, Manhattan. And so this work is ongoing, it's developing, and I've just been contracted for a solo exhibition at Boston University for the fall of 2027, which I will include the existing paintings, plus more paintings, plus drawings. And when I took on this project, I didn't realize that I had family ties directly to the rebuilding of Greenwood Avenue after the massacre occurred. So my great uncle, my paternal grandmother's brother, owned a barbershop on Greenwood Avenue. And so I'm including as much as I can, a replica of his barbershop as an installation for the next exhibition. So y'all got to come to Boston next September 2027.
I forgot what I had put up here. Hi, everyone. So good to be here. I was saying that I used to walk past this space on the way to the gym, the old blank that's in here. And it's just good to be with familiar faces from different parts of my life and also new folks. Let's see. I grew up in Miami, Florida, to Caribbean immigrants from Puerto Rico and Panama. And I think before I talk what's on the screen, I want to share a little bit about the story of my family and what's on my back. Both of their stories was deeply sort of marked by US militarism and imperialism. My father was a Black Puerto Rican recruited by a JROTC program on the islands in 1973, when the draft was, had just been lifted and they were looking for, sources of bodies to go bomb and kill innocent people abroad. So he joined the military then, ended up in Virginia, which is where I was born, near the base. And my mom in Panama left when the US invaded in '89. We end up in Florida, a place that I think contemporarily has very much so been written off as just an inherently backwards place. I think a place that many people joke around, right? The Florida man phenomenon, right? And I think it's a larger display of what people mainstream thinks of the US South more broadly. And with all of that, I also grew up in a very particular part of Miami. I grew up like a few minutes from Southcom, the US Southern Command. And that is the military department that is responsible for bombs all across this hemisphere. So all the Caribbean, Haiti, Venezuela, all of South America, et cetera, et cetera. So I felt constantly that there was like in every corner of my life, there was this thing around US militarism, right? And eventually, I think as I went through my organizing journey, my own intellectual and political development, I think I feel really inspired by Walter Rodney's like words of guerrilla intellectual. He would call himself a guerrilla intellectual. And I think what he sort of poses for us is our responsibility to subvert and undermine and delegitimize the colonial logic of knowledge production, of cultural production, especially, I would say, here in the belly of the beast, but across the global north. And then also simultaneously, I think the other side of that responsibility is to also
unearth and excavate our stories of kinship, of revolution, of solidarity, and of insisting on life despite the odds. So with all of that, right now I have been working on my first book project, which will be out for pre-order in just a few weeks. And this is me in an archive in Havana, Cuba at the Jose Marti National Library, where I'm like reading through zines that folks had made during CIA attacks of bombings of civilians, of tourist hotels on the island, that was also planned in Miami. So it's like this constant connection of like the places I call home, constantly in relationship to each other. But before I was spending time going through hundreds of declassified CIA documents, and all of you haven't done that, it is fascinating and incredibly instructive to hear how our enemies speak about us in behind closed doors. And what I will say about that is that they recognize how arbitrary borders are. They don't speak of us as, oh, yeah, they're different. To them, we're quite literally all the same. Racialized, colonized people that, deserve to be dominated and controlled. So before that project, the book will be out for pre-order next month. It's being published by 1804 Books, who I'm very honored and proud because it's a New York-based socialist independent press whose namesake is an homage of the Haitian Revolution, which is a revolution that I think all of us could always study more deeply and in a more rigorous way. And I think we're all deeply indebted to. And before that project, I think this was one that I think was really fun and beautiful. This was a film that I co-wrote and co-created with some collaborators and comrades called Every Step is a Prayer. And the idea was, again, like to sort of bring into, in a beautiful, surrealist, colorful, animated way, bring histories that have been strategically suppressed. And this was a story of, in Florida, what we now call Florida, these marshlands, these swamplands, were actually a site of maroon communities who had escaped the brutality of slavery in other southern states and had found refuge in those swamps that, in the words of colonizers, are untamable. And in those swamp marshlands, they were met with the Seminole indigenous people. And they, forged a bond, a kinship, families, and more importantly, or I would say in addition to all of that, also fought colonizers in what we now call the Seminole Wars, which went on for extensive decades and were led by Andrew Jackson, who was called Indian Killer. And he said in his own words that he needed to cut through this like solidarity between these indigenous people and these Black fugitives that had found survival in the swamps by any means necessary. It didn't matter how much money, millions of dollars, how much it took. And I think that's incredibly telling of how dangerous our solidarity is to them. And it's a story where we sort of kind of go through the beautiful river of grass. And if you haven't been to the Everglades in Florida, it's truly like one of the most unique places on earth. It's just this shimmering river of grass. So we shot it there, and we wanted to kind of bring that history that I think people who are even from Florida, might even be from Miami, simply had not ever heard of. I think that was like feedback I got, like, never heard of that, did not know that, there was Black Seminoles and Black maroon communities and Seminole people. And it was a beautiful collaboration because we were able to do this with the indigenous tribe of the Everglades and, get their blessing and their collaboration and like that exchange of knowledge, which was really, really beautiful. And interesting, I chose this, makes a lot of sense, but this was earlier this year. I didn't realize that was my face. This was earlier this year during a convoy of artists and organizers, the Nuestra America convoy that takes its name from a Jose Marti essay that was warning people about US imperialism 400 years ago. But it was really beautiful because this was a socialist, small farmer land cooperative, and we can talk more about that. But I think as artists and as people that see the commodification of land reaching new heights or new lows. It was really beautiful to see small farmers have ownership of the land and feel empowered in that way, and to see the type of programming. And also as an antidote to the sanctions that they're dealing with right now, this like manufactured hunger. So yeah, that's what I'll share now for now. Thanks, y'all.
So I'll transition us. Thank you all for the incredible offerings of your practice and your work, and bringing us a little bit into what I know is just a small little blip of the multitudes of the things that you do. So thank you for that grounding. I will move us into questions to hear your brilliant reflections. We're looking forward to. So the first question is, I think, one that's inviting some inspiration for those of us who are newer to the reparations movement, or thinking about and considering what reparations means for our communities. Some people have dismissed reparations as a ludicrous and or far-flung idea that cannot realistically happen. I'm hand quoting, and this is Aisha speaking, realistically happen. But this erases the past and present realities of the many ways reparations have already been put into practice. Want to give some thought to the grounding around Fannie Lou Hamer, and would love to hear from you all. What historical models have inspired you to hold this work, and who has made it tangible and possible?
It's okay.
That's a loaded question. I'm gonna make it really personal, because this is something now y'all know for myself. This is something recent. I actually my father's side of the family has a farm. My pop grew up on a farm in a small town about an hour outside of Little Rock, Arkansas, originally from Arkansas. And Springfield, Morrilton County, Springfield, Arkansas. And so his grandfather, make sure I'm getting that right. His grandfather was the first walker. Gave my government name up to own land, and he's on a mission right now to keep the family farm from being basically stolen. So a lot of farmers, I don't know how many of you are aware, but a lot of farmers' land is being taken from them. So there are a lot of farmers who are in lawsuits to reclaim their land. And so I asked him today, because I wanted to talk about it. I asked him, I said, in one paragraph, can you describe the legacy work you've been creating with the family farm? And his response was, we're taking a 160-acre tract of farmland that has been in the family for nearly 140 years and converting it to a beneficial use that is financial and spiritual. The goal is to make the land productive so that no descendant of Willis and Janie Walker ever again experience a need for food, clothing, or shelter. It is also to be a place of familial and spiritual regeneration. And an ancillary goal is to show other African Americans how to do the same with their inherited lands. So, reparation, that's a little nugget of what reparations means to me in a historical sense for my own family, and why it's, I don't know if I quite answered the question, but that's that's a more personal view, what it means, about, and why I think that it's like, I could really get into like it's kind of almost a ridiculous, not a ridiculous question, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, why, the why part.
Like, say the why, because why.
Right.
Yeah, so just make us think that
when there have been so many others who have received a form of reparations, and we can even go back to the fact that Black American slaves were not given the 40 acres and a mule that they were promised, but the slave masters were in fact given the 40 acres and a mule because the government felt, whomever felt as though, oh, well, you're losing the free labor that you had. So here's this gift from the government to the oppressor, but not to those who were oppressed. So it's like, anyway.
No, that was beautiful. And I think whatever they deny, we need to be about. So if they're denying the legitimacy of reparations and making it seem like it's a pie in the sky dream, just like they're denying our history, that's a sign that that's really where the money is at, both literally and figuratively. And when I think of reparations, I definitely think of it on a global scale, like a nuanced, layered from interpersonal, like deeply personal, like what you just shared, all the way through to countries, then to empires and how they intersected with one another, because we can't deny that the cotton and the sugar that was being grown both in the Caribbean and in the United States ended up in Europe. There was a whole international network and intersection of where the money landed that if we are not in solidarity with one another, it's easier for them to pick off individuals and say, oh, see, we gave them reparations and we're good now. We really need to be thinking globally about our Blackness and the ways that it has been, where it's been sought to be fractured. Like I think about diaspora wars all the time, because the reason why those exist is because we need to be more unified than ever now. And so it would make sense that it makes people happy to see us divided and fighting over where we ended up as a result of enslavement and kidnapping. And I think, I really love the work that has been done in the past. I think we need to really go back and look at the 10-point programs of CARICOM and all the other people who have thought about this really deeply and bring that back to the fore, because our ancestors have pretty much tried a lot of things that we're talking about and trying right now. We just have to go back and reclaim them and brush them off, evolve them, make them fit for our modern context. And I do think land is a big piece of that. Land is, where we feel solid, regenerated, rejuvenated, and it's nuanced, right? Because we're claiming, I wouldn't say we, but anyone who ended up in this hemisphere is claiming indigenous lands as their own. And we have to talk to indigenous people about what does land back mean? And what does that mean in solidarity with one another to have those kinds of conversations, those difficult conversations, and be able to find a way forward. So yeah, land is a part of it. Mental health support is a part of it. Education is a part of it. I'm really down for like credit scores get abolished and we don't have to deal with that. You know what I'm saying? Like we just need to, because we're credit. We're literally credit. So like, why are you trying to make us jump through these hoops? So yes, that's a form. That's and we just need to get together. And so that I'm so grateful for this conversation, because we can begin to tease apart from different, disciplines, right? Artists, land workers, coalition builders. Everyone is here to kind of talk through what it could look like. And I hope we bring more people into the conversation in assemblies like this.
Yeah. I love this question because who knows about reparations? Colonizers. The ones who loot are the ones who are always asking for reparations, and y'all have already spoken to it. But I think in this question of like the legitimacy or the viability, I'm like, the model's there. It was viable for you all. It was viable for France to ask Haiti to pay them back up until very recently. It's viable for them when the US is, asking Cuba, oh, we've lost a lot of money from those sugar corporations. So you owe us money. And they do that in every corner of the world. So I think like we also have to just, humiliate their stupidity. It's insane. And I think on this notion of also the internationalism and the solidarity piece, I think that is also something like in terms of framework, I think COINTELPRO and the multiple waves of the Red Scare really did a number on the Black radical tradition as we understand it today. But I think when we are students of the Black radical tradition, whether it's W.B. Du Bois, June Jordan, Assata Shakur, James Baldwin, Claudia Jones, Paul Robeson, insert a million names here. All of them recognize that the domestic conditions that we are experiencing on these stolen lands are not separate. They're connected and part of the same exact equation of the colonization, of the imperialism that this same empire is exporting to Black people, colonized people, racialized people across the global South. And I think that's, the state, the US government, and because, we're in the 250th years of this settler colony, we know that this is a settler colony that depends a lot on historical amnesia. Like, it's banking on it. It's not surprising we're having historic literacy rates, historically low literacy rates, while we're in, an increasing fascist administration. But I think for me personally, in terms of how I answer this question, I think I've been coming back to learning about that internationalism and also realizing that that was pretty much with every single people I just listed. That was the moment in their organizing work where they really became a threat to the state. That was when W.B. Du Bois went from making money and being one of the most decorated, writers, thinkers, philosophers, playwrights of the 20th century to someone who had his passport revoked, who was in trial. And, Assata Shakur died in Cuba with the other option of dying, in chains here and, so on and so forth. So I think I've been coming back to that history as a means to also like repair that historical amnesia. I was just at the MoMA, and it's no shade to the curators, but they have a exhibition of the architecture in the African continent post-colonialism. I found it fascinating that like they were talking about all of these African post-colonial leaders who all self-identify as socialists, as communists, which is what got them killed or, got a coup to happen in the respective countries. And I think that's strategic. We like sanitize our own ancestors. Like, it doesn't mean we have to identify that everybody has to be a socialist, but it means that we should pay homage to their true history. Assata Shakur was a communist. That was the problem. Malcolm X, he was an internationalist, anti-imperialist. He went to Gaza. The Black Panthers, they were Marxists. They were socialists. Claudia Jones, who started Carnival in London. These were all Black socialists. So I think a lot of our own legacy has been sanitized and neutralized so that it's not incompatible with like the capitalist liberal representation where we're satisfied enough with that. But yeah, I think the Black radical tradition embodies that it organizes against and analyzes racial capitalism, colonialism, and imperialism, not as separate joints, but as all the same machine.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up this point about memory and like and amnesia, because that's where my mind was going to in thinking about the specific example of like answering this question and rooting it in the Black Towns movement, which is where a lot of my current work is rooted, and thinking about the lineage of there were at the time like over 1,000 of these towns, these Black autonomous communities that existed throughout the US that were undermined, dispossessed, and many of them, the ones that do still remain, are like struggling to exist and be commemorated. And I think that the reparations offers, I think, a really powerful framework to not just allow these sites to exist as like static wonders of the past or as these sites of just commemoration of these things that once were, but really seeing them as unfinished freedom projects, and that is the ultimate way to honor their memory, is not just to situate them as these once Black utopian experiments that failed, but actually to understand that they are part of an enduring struggle, and that our work in honoring them is not just to uplift their memory and commemorate them, but also to interrogate for us what is our work of applying the hard-earned lessons of our ancestors and the freedom dreams that they were trying to imagine in these these spaces where they were building their own institutions, their own schools, their own new relationships to the landscape. And that I think part of the reparative work that I'm hoping to do surrounding Allensworth, but I think that in all of us who see our work as part of a lineage of liberation struggles, is not just to repurpose them as blueprints, but actually to integrate the lessons from them into our current conjecture and applying them to our political analysis today. And so I think that piece around memory and nostalgia is so important, and not just to that the work doesn't stop at just acknowledgement. And I appreciated the Kinfolk definition of reparations around, like, it doesn't stop there. It's also about how do we enable the conditions for self-determination to flourish after we acknowledge, right, the harm.
Thank you all so much for those powerful answers. Each of you said so many beautiful things. I'm over here taking notes what y'all are saying. Yeah, I'm hearing so much about paving the way forward and what that means to do that in community, tethers to land, what that means to kind of combat sanitization. And like how can we move forward? And I think I want to pivot us a little bit just in terms of wanting to hear more about like your practice in the realm of reparations, but more so about like imagination, because imagination power is such a powerful tool to move forward with all of the things that you guys are thinking about. And so, how do you activate your imagination? What portals do you create for yourself to dream? Thinking about everything that we're talking about with reparations in your work.
And I'll do it. Well, I mean, as a fine artist, I consider my studio as my sanctuary. So walk in, burn incense. Sometimes I paint. Sometimes I stare at the walls, trying to figure out what it is I want to do. But I'll turn on some jazz music, and I'll just start imagining how. Well, my practice spans many different series, but the Black Wall Street series in particular, I just think about how I can be honest through my craft to tell a story, because essentially, as a lover of film and fine art, I am a storyteller first. So, it has to have some sort of grounding in terms of like what I'm going to be creating as an artist. So thinking about the story, what it is that I want to share. And when speaking about the community that was built on Greenwood Avenue, my goal is to depict these figures as humans, people that actually live. Like, these aren't just paintings, but the people that sit for me are friends of mine or friends of friends, and they are representing folk that actually lived during that time. So I'm trying to like bridge the gap from the past to the present, and creating a sense of community. When you see the work, you look at these faces and you are being, representation matters, right? So you're seeing these Black faces, and you remember that there was a point in time before desegregation when we relied on ourselves to forge through the fire. The Black dollar was, I believe, passed 100 times in Tulsa before it ever exited the community. There were white folks across the tracks that would come within that community to spend their money. So it's like we've done it before. And one of many goals in terms of that series that I want to like relay that message so that people understand that we've done it before and we can do it again.
Thank you.
I just love the picture that you painted with the incense and like setting the vibe of your space. And, you know, we have a new storefront that we opened up at 410 Marcus Garvey, right next to, we got incense. I burn incense every day. I light a candle, I burn my incense. But I do find that, you know, I'm longing for more of that imagination for myself. I do a lot of facilitating of other people's imagination in spaces. But one of the ways that I do open up portals is through travel. I love to travel wherever we are and see what we're up to, you know, how we're making things work with the little or sometimes the lot that we have. And, you know, recently I was able to go to Jamaica on a delegation with the Center for Third World Organizing to Maroon communities. And it was so beautiful to see how Maroon communities are continuing to navigate that balance between being in the world and not of it, like being in societies that have the histories of colonization and still managing to preserve their joy, preserve their values, and still navigate and compromise if necessary and make those difficult choices and how and what that looks like. And so I'm bringing some of the learnings from that into my practice. You know, in our community land trust work, we are building little structures, like the legal structure for what it looks like to own land collectively. And one of the, I would say, most imaginative things that we've done came from EBPREC, which is East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative, and their visual bylaws. We've developed our own version of visual bylaws so that there are collages on every page. The text is broken up so that when you become a member of our community land trust, it's not about reading a 100-page fully text document. It's visually engaging. It represents us. There are images of us in Bed-Stuy, in Crown Heights, in our catchment area, so that we begin to imagine ourselves once again stewarding these spaces that people are saying that we've lost. We haven't lost them. We're still here. And so that's, you know, where some of my imagination lies. And the other thing is in the structure that we just built at that crossroads. And, you know, it was part of a project that we frankly began at the Laundromat Project called the Black Utopia Project. And so that crossroads is the corridor to Black Utopia, is what we call it amongst ourselves. How do we bring spaces of history forward into the present and make sure that contemporary Black people, organizations are staying connected, are staying rooted, are able to remain in neighborhoods and not be priced out by landlords who look at land as a commodity and not kin. And so this is part of the message that I hope to unfold over the next 11 months that that structure remains there is, what if we looked at land as kin? We're at a crossroads right now in our country where I think we have to fight against apathy and fight against escaping into technology and not allowing technology to be used as the tool that it is. Instead, we're becoming the tools. And so we have to really begin to reclaim our imagination from these spaces and these places that would want to colonize that and have us thinking the way they want to think, seeing things that don't exist in ways that they want us to see it. And that's why I also love Kinfolk as well, because they're taking the monuments and they're making sure that we're seeing ourselves in the future. They're learning how to utilize the technology and not be used by the technology. And so for me, these are the most exciting ways that we can create portals, is not by shunning technology, but being empowered in it, not by shunning owning land, but looking at it as kin. Like, how do we repair land? How do we be matriarch? How do we heal land as we heal ourselves? So these are the things that excite me. And frankly, I want a vacation so bad, so I can sit down and like dream about these things more. Not work so much, but yeah, that's where I'll stop.
It's a vacation. Yeah, I really appreciate this question. I feel like I do panels often, and I feel like in 2020, we were talking a lot more about imagination, possibly because we had more time and the world was reckoning with the things we've known for a long time. But yeah, I think if I'm being real, I mean, I think it's a struggle. I think it might, I put combat pessimism, combat numbing. I think, the second we open our phones, we're like
inundated with just so much content of all sorts, like news, violence, ads. Like it's just simply too much for our brains to be intaking. And I also think just the like escalation of violence that the US has been up to these past couple of years. I mean, it's really an escalation. I think, I mean, at least for myself, I'm definitely responding to that. I think, you know, there are times where I'm like, I can't today, you know, I really can't. But I think that's also a tool of, you know, our oppressors to make us numb, to make us apathetic, to sort of instill that pessimism in us, where we don't believe there's a way out, that there's a way through, that we're just subject to this in continuity. And I think there are days, if I'm just being real, like just to do it, like there are days where I might feel that, just to be straight up. You know, it is a constant back and forth. And then there are days where I feel really embodied and attuned with the knowing that like we have done, some of the dreams have already happened. They've just been stolen from us or forgotten. But I think, you know, to this visual that y'all have been talking about, it says, yes, makes sense. And I think, you know, something that's been helping me is just, if I don't have access to just being on the land, like literally just like on sun, you know, taking in sun, growing food, go swimming in the ocean. I think also just consuming culture and art, you know, that's also something that's like very stripped from us. Like, I don't know why museums cost so much money. But this summer, I think I like made an intention to come back to all the different art and culture forms that really nourish me. I was at Black Star Film Fest this past weekend, and and y'all, I had not allowed myself to cry in a minute. Like I didn't realize until I was watching all these films and like tears were just pouring. Yes, in response to what I was watching, but I think it was, you know, there had been suppressed. And, you know, I watched beautiful Black Brazilian films, Haitian films, Black Puerto Rican films, just like really, you know, tending to like our spirit realm as well. Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of art and live music. Like it seems simplistic, and maybe it is, but I have found that making time for that, like reconnecting with cultural production, not just as a conduit or like as a collaborator, but like to receive it and be in awe, has been deeply healing. And yeah, what else? Yeah, I think that's kind of what I'll share. I mean, I think a lot of my work is like, you know, more in like the books and the texts. And I do think I've been like trying to reject the like quote unquote writer thing of disappearing for 2 years. Yeah, I was like, I'm not doing that. So, you know, I think insisting on life against the odds, I think that's what we're up to.
Yeah. There's this really amazing essay by this person named Nika Siegel about like she writes about kind of Fanon's relationship to reparations, and he didn't like talk a lot about reparations in his work, but when he did express some healthy skepticism of like retroactive reparations out of fear that it would tie Black folks to like bind Black folks too heavily on the original site of harm or onto the debt, and that would like reify in some ways that relationship. And I say that not to minimize like the worthy efforts around retroactive reparations, but what she explains in the essay is that she like offers up this other frame that he wrote about around preparing new ground of like, what if instead of repair, we're actually talking about preparing the new ground for alternative worlds or alternative models. And I think that connects really beautifully to this idea of reparation, of imagination around, creating some of like, I think what you're saying around this like embodied way of knowing, and that through preparing new ground, through like rehearsing these alternatives, like that is how you can widen the frame of what's possible, so that what's possible isn't that the harm that happened isn't the baseline or of your imagination, but that you're like creating a container to imagine other ways of imagining alternative models and worlds. And so I don't think it's instead of, but I think it's like another way to think of alongside the retroactive reparations, like how are we also preparing new ground for alternative worlds that like we don't even know what that could be or look like yet, but practicing it together.
Thank y'all for all those reflections and just, I think, affirming how important it is to have space to think and vision and dream. And I'm sitting over here on the side, like vacation reparations towards vacation. Like we don't talk about that, what it means to like be whole and well and healed and doing the work as well. So thank you for uplifting that in your many reflection. For time, we're gonna go quick responses to the last question. Just like split fire. I think that's what it is. So in her seminal poem, Revolution is Love, Assata Shakur said, it's not enough just to change the system. We need to change ourselves. We have got to make this world user-friendly. Oftentimes we may consider external transformation to be proof of progress towards justice and equity. Assata reminds us that the internal transformation is just as important and essential, and y'all have reflected that in your reflections as well. So I think what I'll lean into on this question is, can you share how this work has changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think I see that quote like as an invitation, something I try to remind myself in my practice is really just to interrogate or recognize the ways that the white supremacist defaults that we're fighting against also like show up in our ways of working or our own default ways of thinking. And I think that, yeah, it being in a constant practice and making sure I have folks who are holding me accountable and holding a mirror up to me that can like check me when I do slip back into default ways of working that don't align to my values or the world that I'm trying to build.
I super resonate with that. Like I hear the quote as like invitation, provocation a bit. And the first thing that came to mind when you asked was like, I have had to reckon with like my own Western exceptionalism or like Western chauvinism. I think I've been fortunate to travel quite a lot. And I think Black folks and folks all over the world will clock this real quick. And there's a lot of grounds to, you know, like their reflections. And it's not to like minimize the, you know, fuck shit here. And I think now, like when I'm doing things, I'm like, what would a person who's, you know, in Salvador, Brazil, how would they make sense of my work? And like, do I feel proud of like the contributions? Do I feel like it's resonant? Do I feel like it's in conversation? Do I feel like it's in right relationship? So I think that's like what I've been thinking about.
Spitfire on such a deep question, Aisha. I think this work has shown me that there is no one else, that we have to do it. We can't look to anyone else to do our work for us. And so that's deeply humbling. And so on mornings when I'm like, I don't feel like getting up and do it, sometimes I don't, but I always think of the legacy and the lineage that we're all working in and how it's a privilege to not have to go and work in corporate America where I used to work, to feel like my work has meaning and that I'm building relationships and I'm repairing relationships. I think the work has led me to, you know, and my son, who's my co-founder, we have committed to family therapy because there's so many ways in which families have been colonized in the way that we look at each other as people to be sucked dry and not replenished and shared with and loved on and cared for. Sometimes we're harsher with each other than other people are with us. And so I think that's the piece of repair, like the personal repair that really feels most meaningful to me is like I had a therapy session before I came here and thinking about the family, you know, generational curses as people call it, but really it's trauma. that, you know, we need to heal if we're going to actually inhabit this world that we're dreaming of. So for me, it's like that therapeutic healing with a professional, not with some online. You know what I mean? Like you need someone who knows what they're doing to help you sort through this stuff. So yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Can't believe I didn't mention this from the outset, but what really jump-started my interest in the series Black Wall Street, A Case for Reparations, was I was in bed and I was looking through YouTube, looking at some dumb-ish, and I just so happened upon this video of this elderly woman who was recounting her experience as a resident in Tulsa during the massacre. She told a story about how she was in her living room. It was a bright sunny day, and it was raining outside. So she thought, and she asked her mother, "How is this so?" And her mother had her walk to the window, and she pointed in the distance, and she said, "You see those men out there with guns? Those aren't raindrops that are falling on our rooftop. Those are bullets." Her name was Dr. Olivia J. Hooker. And she serves as the matriarch for the series that I've done. I got a chance to meet her. I went up to, I think it was just off the Metro North, I forget, Poughkeepsie, to listen to her speak. And where am I going with this? It made me cry when I was watching the video because it felt as though I was listening to my own grandmother recount this story. And that's what set the whole thing off, for real. I don't know if this even is really answering your question, but it's what inspired me to embark upon the work. And I don't know, it has a meaningful place in my heart, and I'm hoping that the work that those feelings are transferred to those who see the work, and it begins a conversation about reclamation, self-love, as an act of revolution. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so
This one works.
Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. That was really beautiful. I'm hearing the power of the work to heal, to make you feel something, to sort of change the terrain of your own intentionality. So beautiful, so many beautiful words, and so much vulnerability and wisdom. So I thank you all so much for answering our questions with such, all of what I said. We're going to transition now to audience Q&A. And so folks who are tuning in on Zoom, feel free to put your questions in the chat or on using the Q&A button. And I think if you have a question here in this space, feel free to raise your hand and we'll pass the mic around in that way. And then we can out the questions aloud that are in the chat and on Zoom. Cool. So if anyone is in the space who has a question, feel free to raise your hand and we'll get them to you.
I think imagination is a really powerful thing. So I want to return back to that for a second, because I think it has this sense of memory and homage to our deepest healing. And I think telling our stories is the most revolutionary act we can ever do. So I appreciate you guys sharing yours today. So I get chills just because it's so important to be able to remember things that others have forgotten. And I think that work can be very heavy. And I think the most revolutionary act in finding your ways to tell your story to connect with community is finding how do you like rest? How do you finally exhale so you can't imagine because you're no longer in survival? And I'm curious for you guys, what has that stillness, whether that be the boredomness, removal, the connection to self, like how do you return to that? It's very, we have a very busy environment, whether in New York City or in your life. I think that stillness is so essential to this work. So I'm just curious what that rest, that stillness, that connection.
It's charged, but for some reason I turned it off and but I think y'all did hear. Make sure hello. Okay, okay. I do think getting out of New York helps because it is such a frenetic pace at times, you know, whether it be making sure you can pay your rent and pay all the things, like it can be very easy to just start grabbing at whatever you can do and not being intentional. So I really do believe, even if it's to the Rockaways or upstate or Boston or Atlanta, where my mom, like just getting away so that you can begin to see a little more clearly is super helpful. And I do find that meditation has been helping, not in the traditional sense, I'm just going to sit down, but in the morning, waking up and just making sure that I'm breathing. It's so easy to forget to breathe in the midst of your day, having that moment, like drinking my water. My youngest got me a bottle of like a beautiful carafe. So now I fill that up and I put that next to my bed, just building in systems that make it easy for me to connect with my body and the fact that I'm human and not just like a doing, not someone who's just producing and doing things. So that's definitely helpful. Yeah.
I think I would add for the question. I think one of the most like affordable, impactful ways that I have found is like just being in deep friendship. Again, I know it sounds so overly simplistic, but we're in a crisis of communication. I think most of us are spending more and more time alone. For people who are working from home. I mean, there's like a there's a complete, you know, the third spaces like in the US don't really exist. So I have found that seeing relationship as something that's worthwhile, right? In the same way that we invest in our careers and all these things, like investing in our relationships is worthwhile. And I think when you do travel to other parts of the world, even if folks are poor, like wherever in the global south, folks are hanging out.
Yes.
They are outside, they're in the plaza, they're in the park, they're making out outside the church, like, you know, like, and I think it's something that always strikes me as just like, again, this like consistent on connection, on being like, even if we don't have resources, like we have one another. And I know we know that, but I think like, how do we integrate that into our daily or weekly life? Like, really, you know, build systems so that, you know, we're not like isolated and seeing folks like every quarter, you know, which I think happens is we're so exhausted and, you know, we're just in this loop of overwork and exhaustion. But I think it's deeply nourishing. I think it like pours into our cup. Silly, simple, but deeply impactful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. My mind was also going to kind of like a relational place. I think like as a lot of my work is spent very like research and archive based, it can be very solitary. And then also when I end up in community with folks, it becomes like about the work or about the task. And I think I had to check myself and also just be like, remind myself of it. It's also about the quality of our relationships and the trust that we're building, breaking bread with one another. And so like a lot of my work is just about that and not just always being the one that's like trying to move the timeline along, which like is my default is like, yeah, what's that? I'm like, Libra. Oh. Yeah. But yeah, someone who like tends to be the project manager, organizer person, I tend to like that tends to be how I contribute to a group, but also finding other ways to slow down and just recognize that like the work can only move at our capacity, the capacity of our trust and relationships, and that like that's ultimately what it's about. But yeah, it's been required a lot of like some of that unlearning I was talking about earlier is very much about that, around like releasing this attachment to productivity.
Die, so that's not gonna work at all.
So it sounds.
Oh, let's see how long it lasts.
Yeah.
Oh, is this working?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. So thank you all for getting in. I know my voice can be soft, so I'm trying to prepare to project if need be. Alrighty, so I've been over here with the chat, and I just wanted to share some resonance that's been coming up from the virtual community. I mean, also I want to shout out to ASL. They have been interpreting you all energy very expressively. So your words are being felt. But also, yeah, just folks really sitting and affirming what you all are sharing. I love that, not asking for inclusion, but challenging the premises in the first place of Western art practices / subjects. We got a good say that in all caps. Reparations makes more sense than corruption and kleptocracy. I don't know how to say all that together, but the bureaucracy, the cracy with klepto.
My grandma from the shop tuned in and said,
Oh, Miss Sheila. Thank you, Miss Sheila. Yes, and then also to points that were made earlier about apathy. So I fear apathy more than death, someone said. And so just talking about integrating work, service, and rest. So I think what you were saying, Shanna, around vacation really resonated as well. So folks were also a Black Star and experiencing emotions as well. Someone said, oh, back to Miss Sheila. She said, tyranny is never inevitable. Art teaches us this. Self-transformation is a collective endeavor.
yeah.
And then a question from Ms. Sheila is, more Black art needs to be shown, exhibited, and yes, collected. What relationships with curators, agents, sponsors, etc., do you all find helpful?
You can pass it along, but.
What relationship? I'm sorry.
So. I don't know. Good joke.
More Black art needs to be shown, exhibited, and yes, collected. What relationships with curators, agents, sponsors, etc., do you all find helpful?
So in the grander scheme of things, in terms of the art world, I'm somewhat of a infant. I don't have gallery representation. So I would be the equivalent of an independent underground hip hop. Can I do my hip hop? Somebody said. So I'm not Jay-Z, but I'm most Def or Yasin for the, you know what I mean? But I understand that it's important to have reach. The reason why artists give gallerists, curators 50 to 60% is because they allegedly have the reach, they have the distribution, they have the, but so I'm at this point where I'm like, do I want to give away 50% of myself to these galleries just to get my work out there, or do I want to do what I've been doing, which is the independent route, and receiving all the funds, So I'm working with a woman who is acting as my agent, acting as my dealer. She is Black. She is smart. And I'm loving the relationship. And she's only asking for 25%. So that's the way I'm approaching it. More independent. It's working for me right now. So, but yes, more Black work needs to be produced. More Black work needs to be collected. And I was speaking with Janora earlier about the fact that at least right now, the largest demographic of humans that are collecting Black art are Black women. So there's something to be said about that.
Well, I'd love to actually expand Miss Sheila's question. I know the question was around Black art, but if we replace art with spaces, I just think about the land work that you all are doing collectively, and so just really interested in, what resources there are, people, networks, connections to, and you can say Black, Latinx, Indigenous, but how are you all connecting to resources around preserving these spaces that you're working in? And if you could shout out some resources, some people, some organizations.
So in terms of just thought partnership, we're a translocal member of the Boston Ujima Project. And, I really find their index helpful of how they select who to work with and what projects to engage with. So I find them a really amazing resource. Nicely, New York City Community Land Initiative is also, which is a project of the New Economy Project. They're great partners in helping to identify other community land trusts that have land. So we're in coalition with East New York CLT, Cooper Square CLT, and I find that thought partnership helpful, even though everyone is so busy. Sometimes it's hard to get the kind of information that you need. One of the things that in my imagining and that I'm working towards is a group of small investors to create a fund. Recently, we got engaged with the fight around 375 Stuyvesant, which is Dr. Josephine English's mansion. She was a pioneering gynecologist and obstetrician here in New York State. And one of the things that I find us coming up against is not being able to move at the speed of the market. So people are privately purchasing things and just moving so quickly. And it can be demoralizing to people as they volunteer efforts and their energy with these projects. And so I've been meeting with a small group of co-conspirators about how do we get not only our local electeds, but other people like quiet millionaires in the neighborhood to pool their funds to create a fund so that when properties come on the market or off the market, we can move as quickly as some of these private equity companies who are snapping up our neighborhoods wholesale. And so that feels really promising. Like the conversations have ranged just from our own personal money stories, which is something that we don't talk about, like how the trauma around money that a lot of us have experienced that makes it sometimes hard to hold a lot of it and be able to use that power in ways that benefit our community. To who do we need to be talking to? What is it going to look like for us to make decisions together? And I think that's the most promising thing. And as it evolves, you guys will know. Resource generation was someone that came across our table to say like, hey, reach out to them. They're, people who have made money, their families have made money and they have disposable income that they're willing to, use towards, different endeavors. And so it's been interesting to engage with them and see how deep some pockets actually run in this city. I'm like, wow, okay. But yeah, I think being in coalition and partnership with also East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative. I've met Noni Sessions, their executive director, and she's been forthcoming with her struggles and the ways that she's been able to cultivate community. So right now for us, it's not money per se, but it is the networks that will hopefully get us to the money that will allow us to acquire steward.
two like resources come to mind. One is the New Economy Coalition has a really great Black and Indigenous land working group. So it's like a monthly group of folks who are at different stages of either developing land projects or thinking about like solidarity economics and how to incorporate it into their place-based work. I'm sure if you Google it, you'll be able to find the like way to sign up for the group. There's also a really great project that's also being started by an artist from the Bay Area, Yetunde, who is starting this project called Ajamu Space. That's like a kind of gathering space for Black folks who are thinking about land work. And you can probably find them on Instagram, and Yetunde is doing some really great like holding circle for folks, Black folks around that. I also earlier this year did this really great Skillshare at Salmon Creek Farm, which is a artist residency and land project in Northern California. And they have this retreat that they host called a Land Project Skillshare, where folks who are at different stages of starting land projects can kind of go and learn from their model. It's like a former commune that was bought by an artist in like the early 2000s, and he runs it as a residency and art space. So I found it really regenerative to like be in community with other folks who are kind of trying to reach for these models, or people who are at different stages, that you can like learn from people who are still at just the idea stage to people who've actually like acquired land and are stewarding it, to people who are like somewhere in the middle. But those are a couple folks who have been really grounding for me. Yes, that's Ashara just dropped it in the chat. You too, okay?
Okay, so we can have like maybe 3 more minutes for questions. So if anyone else in this space has a question, just want to leave opportunity for one last rapid fire audience question. First of all, thank y'all so much. This has been such a powerful conversation to listen in on. My name is Kaz. I'm with the Launchpad Project. My question is about you all strategies for protecting yourselves, your people, your work in an era of increased surveillance. Given the call out to the 250th anniversary of all of the terrible violence that we now encounter every day in the United States, I'm just curious about like what measures you're taking, if any, to insist that your work is matters and meaningful, and that the people you're in community with deserve visibility despite the risk that it poses.
Is the question about safety and surveillance, or more so about like funding and?
More so safety and surveillance.
Oh.
I mean, I think the person that was popping in my mind was just like kind of what we were talking about earlier around like how are we learning from the past?
Yes.
Like these are not, these things are cyclical, and like how are we learning from the strategies and tactics of those that came before us? And also, I think especially because we're in, I think, a moment where more folks are coming into consciousness around the fact that like I think a lot of the institutions and places that we were looking to for inclusion or validation are not going to save us, and that they're limited in their capacity to support us. So I think more and more folks are really gravitating towards these more like outsider projects that don't need to seek representation or validation, and like don't need to be like in public view or the public sphere. And so I think I'm really taking lessons from that and thinking and being like more selective or intentional about like what I offer up publicly and like what I keep to myself or keep in community, and embracing more like analog practices. I've been making zines, I've been doing Rezo stuff, I've been just trying to be less online or more intentional about what I am sharing publicly for the taking, and that like indexing less on like representation
I think I've been thinking of a few things, super connected to what you just said. I think on one, like recognizing that there's inherent risk in the work that we do and that our history demonstrates that. I think recognizing that communication systems such as like Signal or WhatsApp are not as safe as we have thought they were in the past. So not writing anything that I would want in a court used against me. You know, because that's exactly what's happening right now against organizers. And yeah, I think returning to some analog. I think also I do like a lot of like educational reels, and I think I want to do one on like the anti-American committee and like the whole McCarthy era, because I think it's like we've heard that like McCarthy era, but I actually think there's really concrete lessons of what to expect of how this is going to go down, because we're really pulling exactly from even those like legal apparatus and re-enlivening them to criminalize us. And I think ultimately like not snitching on each other, like not turning our back on one another. You know, they're really banking on the fear of like you isolate an organization or organizations and that folks will turn on them. I think that's what we're seeing with like some of the reports that the State Department has pulled in like the last 6 months. And really they're coming for everybody. You know, I mean, Mayor Zoran Mamdani is like in the report. And then there's actually also like communists. And I think now's not the time for like sectoral differences. We really got to stick together, and they come for one, they're coming for all of us.
Deeply resonate with that, and also, you know, with the way you opened up the conversation, talking about doing our research and looking at the way that COINTELPRO operated by planting people in organizations to destroy those organizations from within. And so we've been trying to be really, really intentional and slow with how we bring people into our work. And that's through like deep relationship building, having those difficult conversations, seeing where people's heads are at, seeing how much work folks are willing to do. You know, my aunt, who was an organizer, was like, you can tell, it's funny, like, you can tell a stitch because they don't ever do no work. I give them some work to do. See what happens. And I'm like, okay, that's some wisdom there, right? Like, here's a job to do. Let's see if you continue to show up and do what you're supposed to do, or are you just talking the talk and not doing anything? So, you know, it's those sorts of things, like really researching and understanding, because the playbook doesn't change. They're not creative when it comes to that. They just dust off the shit that worked before and do it again. And they just bank on the fact that we won't know and understand the lessons of those playbooks, the misinformation, you know, doxing people online, putting words in people's mouths that don't really fit and belong to them. And that's where that the relationship building comes in. If you know people deeply, you know, they didn't say that. I don't believe that. And so I'm not going to fall for it. So it's that slow, unglamorous work that needs to get done. That doesn't happen online. It happens, you know, day by day, person by person, conversation by conversation. So, yeah.
Beautiful, Vanessa. I'll be brief. So it took me a while to realize that I'm a history painter. Initially, I was just trying to find my way and figure it out. But what I do is I create provocative work, but from the lens of love. You know, I'm doing a series on a complete and total massacre of 40 blocks, the equivalent of 40 square blocks. But the approach that I'm taking is not from, you know, focusing so much on the death and destruction that took place, but on lionizing the people that lived in that community, holding them up so that we know that this is, you know, from whence we came. And also just like, I mean, is it me, or every day you open up your phone and you go on Instagram or whatever social media platform you see someone Black or Latin, someone of color being hemmed up by the police, right? So I'm intentional about policing the police. So if I'm going home, like, I don't know about what's going on but in your neighborhood, but in East Flatbush, there's cops on every block, it seems like. It seems like it's increasing every week. I don't know what's happening, but when I go home, I'm intentional about like seeing what they're doing. And if they've got somebody hemmed up on a wall, I'm right there. And I'm not leaving until I know that that person is safe or, just, I don't know. So anyway, I'm just trying to be as intentional and aware of my work to not only serve as a form of beauty, but also as a form of activism.
Thank you all so much for your beautiful answers, and thank you to the audience, virtual and live in person, for your wonderful questions. I just want to ask a quick rapid fire closing question to the panelists to ask, where can we find you and more of your work, and are there ways that we can support you?
Ajamu Kojo on Instagram. AjamuKojo.com is the website. It's currently being worked on under construction. And come to Boston University 2027 in September. Check it out.
So at Grow House BK on Instagram and www.org. Yeah.
Venus Roots on Instagram, venusroots.com, getting to the root of it with Venus Roots if you listen to podcasts. Yeah, Instagram, I'm an IG girl.
Instagram, I'm Ariana Faye, and my website is arianaallensworth.com. You can also find the Anti-Eviction Mapping Project at Anti-Eviction Map on Instagram, and I think it's also the same handle on X. I don't know what its called anymore because I don't do that account. And I'll be sharing more about my work at Allensworth at the Black Portraitures Conference in September. It's streaming virtually, and also it'll be at UCLA. If anybody online is based in that part of the country. Yeah.
We will have all of your socials, all of this information going out in a post-event email. So we should have everyone's email in this space, but if not, feel free to log that in with us, and we can get you that post-event email with resources and the recording of this teaching, and everything in between. But yeah, we'll go to our closing slides to just make some quick announcements to close. If they could hit the slide. I'll pass it to Aisha.
So a closing and a thank you and gratitude for all the offerings into the space, to Kinfolk for being in partnership on this incredible and so deeply grateful to be in community with you all, and for all the artists for your continued visions, your inspiration, just offerings and kind of an opportunity to get into ourselves and think about what's possible. So thank you, and for all the folks here in the space. Also a special shout out to 2 team members on the LP side who helped put this together, Catherine Johnson, our Director of Programs, and Angela Avio, our Programs Coordinator. So just want to bring them into the space this evening also. And so, yes, an announcement. We are restarting our fall liberation series here in the storefront. On the screen right now are the series of programs that happen. We are here in the storefront every first Friday of the month with art offerings, community gathering, DJ. There is food for those folks who are in New York. Please come up to Bedside, Fulton Street, 1476 Fulton. Or I shouldn't be started saying Harriet Tubman Way. So a series of programs the first Friday of every month. So we're here September through December. I'm just looking forward to seeing folks come and engage and learn, rebuild, and create and imagine vision kind of about space for imagination that becomes a space for imagination. To take an evening, 2 hours out of the day just to be one with folks and with yourself. So just want to help with that as one more. Next slide, please. Oh, how to support us? Yes. Because when you give us money, we give money back out into community. Yes, laundromatproject.org is our website. You can make contributions to the work that way, as well as you can find us on Instagram. Comp team keeps things flowing on there. Always information that's available about what we're up to and ways that you can engage more deeply.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Kinfolk's end. This marked the ending of our teaching series of People's Archive. Thank you all so much for everything, for the folks virtually who have tuned in, to more than one who have tuned in to any of them, for folks here, like thank you all so much for being a part of it and contributing your energy and your presence and your questions. And thank you to the artists and then culture workers and everyone here for contributing so much to the space as well. I'm so happy for the series to be wrapped up in a little bow. Thank you all so much. Okay, and then Daily, do you want to talk about community voice?
Yeah, so Kinfolk is in the process of building a really cool digital storytelling platform. And we are doing demo sessions to give folks an early look and share some of their feedback, thoughts, and reactions to the technology we're developing. Building in public and building with community is a huge staple of our organization. And so this is a fourth and final demo session of a tool that for the time being we're calling Community Voice. This session will be on Thursday, September 3rd at 12 p.m. Eastern. It'll be a 1-hour session with our product team, our head of product, and our senior technologist, and our head of impact will be running that session. And so if anyone is curious to see more of our digital storytelling platform that is in development, this is your chance, and we'll have a lot more exciting news about this tool in the coming weeks. So yeah, if you're interested, you can scan this QR code real quick to get onto the RSVP. And you can also keep an eye out on the Kinfolk Tech socials for more information and links to these demo sessions as well.
Thank you so much, Daily. Daily is our digital storytelling manager at Kinfolk. He's been managing the Zoom behind everything. So next slide. Yeah, so here's the QR code to download the Kinfolk app, or feel free to just go in the App Store and download that on your own if you'd like to see more of Kinfolk's augmented reality memory work. Just wanted to include that here. Next slide, please. And lastly, ways to support us at Kinfolk Tech. We do have a survey. We would really love for y'all to fill it out if you can scan that QR code on the left there and to give us your feedback. It really does help support us financially and also just help us learn and improve. I'm the cultural programs manager, so hearing the feedback is also just super helpful for me. So I wanted to say that. And then also feel free if you would like to donate as well to financially support us. If you're on Zoom. Exactly, to keep our programs free and open to the public. The donation links and everything should also go in the chat as well. And everything that we said, their donation links at the Laundromat Project, everything will go out in the post-event email. I also wanted to say that if you're curious about the rest of the teaching series, that is all also on our YouTube channel at Kinfolk Tech. If you want to go back and watch this beautiful panel and other panels that we have as well. Yeah, and with that said, thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you to the ASL interpreters, really holding it down. Thank you to the rest of my team. Thank you, Raven. Fixing programs here, reading up the questions and supporting me. And yeah, Daylight, digital storytelling manager, and everyone on the LP team here today that's been really holding it down. And thank you to the audience and everyone here again. All right. That's the
It was so good to be at. Say, yeah. So you're kind of leading too. My family kind of leading as well. Oh.
Della, if you can hear me from the phone, I'm gonna let us go. Thank
Sounds
you.
good.
For
Thank you.
all of y'all supports.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We're shutting her down. Have a good night.
Thank you so much.